Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Help the Hellbender live event. My name is Shelby, and I am the Hellbender Husbandry Coordinator out at Purdue University. We are super excited that you guys could be here today. We have an exciting lineup for you guys today. We will be chatting with two of the Hellbender specialists down at Mesker Park Zoo. So let's go ahead. We'll introduce our other Help the Hellbender partner, which is Nick. Go ahead and introduce yourself one more time.
Hi, I'm Nick Burgmeier. I'm the Wildlife Extension Specialist with the Hellbender Project. And if you guys have any questions, please put them in the comments and I will try to pass those along when we get to the question and answer section.
Thank you, Nick. So yeah, just like I said and Nick said, if you have any questions, please go ahead and throw them in the comment box below. That way we can go ahead and get those live questions answered for you. So the first specialist that we are going to be talking to is Sean Wolk, and he is going to talk to you about their breeding facility and how they go about doing that. So let's get him started. Sean, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
All right, go ahead.
Alrighty, hello to everyone out there in cyberspace. Once again, my name is Sean Wallach, and I'm coming to you live today from Mesker Park Zoo and Botanic Gardens, and it's my pleasure today to take you guys on a tour of our breeding facility, which is right behind this door here. But before we do that, I'd like to give a quick shout out to all our sponsors who are prominently displayed here on our door. We like to give credit where credit's due. All right, so if everybody's ready, follow me and we'll step on in. Now, since this is a biosecure wet lab, we do like to use our foot baths to make sure that we keep any pathogens from coming in here and infecting our hellbenders, that we're keeping safe. And right this way. Thank you for my camera person stepping in the foot bath. Okay, the first thing I'd like to point out to you guys is one of our holding systems that we have here in our stream room. This is just a holding system that we have several of our hellbenders in. These guys are juvenile hellbenders. They're not quite adult size, but if anybody would like to know approximately how big they are, we brought a banana for scale, and you can see that these juveniles are getting up to about banana size. So they should be ready to start their new lives, whether that's being released into the wild or included into our breeding program within the next year or two. We don't know which way they'll be going. Those decisions come down from on high. My job is just to keep everybody alive and healthy. Okay, so now the moment everybody's been waiting for, I'd like to show you guys our simulated stream that we've put together so that we can actually try to breed hellbenders here in the wild. And as you can see, it is a very long monstrosity that takes up this entire room. It's about 30 feet long, it's about 4 feet wide, and it can go up to about 3 foot in depth. We try to keep it a little bit under that. We try to mimic the water flow and water levels of the Blue River as much as possible. We start down here with our intake, which goes to our 100-gallon per minute pump, which is a pretty big pump. From there, we go down to our chilling units. They sit on this big sump tank here. This is how we keep our water temperatures down, and we try to follow the temperature curves provided by our field researchers as closely as possible. You'll notice I have everything turned off right now. It is very loud in here when all this stuff is running, and if I hadn't turned it off, you guys wouldn't be able to hear me. As you come farther down, you can see that we have our big pipe that goes to a bypass that helps us regulate our current in our stream. We also have a large tank here, which we store our feeder minnows in so that we can feed these out whenever the hellbenders get hungry. We also use this as a salting tank. Salting our minnows gets rid of any pathogens that might come in on them, especially that darn chytrid that we want to keep out of here. So we salt our minnows for 3 weeks. And at that time, we figured that they are no longer that they're pathogen free, so that they're safe to feed out to our hellbenders. As we come down, you'll see that we have a solid particulate filter. This is a cool sand filter. This will do about 33 gallons a minute, so it does our stream multiple times a day, so it keeps our water crystal clear. And then we have some other types of filtration here. This is what's called a bio tower. This thing's packed full of bio balls, which gives bacteria a lot of room to grow. And those bacteria break down the ammonia that the hellbenders put out in their waste products. And it breaks it down from a toxic product into basically through a process that breaks it down into nitrate, which is a lot less toxic, and then we can take that out through water changes. We also have UV filtration here. This keeps algae from growing in our stream and any kind of bad bacteria that we don't want growing. And basically, that's just UV radiation from a high intensity bulb in close proximity to the water, and it just kills off microbes. Like I mentioned with our bio tower here, we do have a lot of waste products to treat, and we've got to keep track of those. And a lot of people want to know how we keep track of those. So we've actually got a water testing station over on the other side here. So this is all the water testing equipment that somebody would use out in the field. I just happen to be lucky enough that my research field is right here in an air-conditioned room, so I get to stay nice and comfy. But we've got little meters that do total dissolved solids we can look at. This is a photospectrometer that's produced by a company called Hawk. With this, we can check all the different chemicals that happen to be present in the water. And then once we know what's in the water, we can take steps to remediate that. And now we've also got the RO system over there, so all of our water is filtered before it comes in. So we keep a really good track of the water quality because hellbenders in the wild are an indicator species of good water quality. So to have hellbenders, you have to have good water quality. So for us to keep them here, we have to make sure our water is just spot on. So if everybody will come this way, we can actually get a look down the stream now. And one of the first things people notice when they look at our stream is these gigantic concrete boxes that you see here. These concrete boxes are actually what we use to house our hellbenders, and these simulate the natural environment that you would find them in out in the wild. Hellbenders like to spend a lot of their times under rocks on the bottom of the stream. So these boxes are specially designed to emulate that, and it gives them a small hole to look out of, so that they can hunt prey, and they can sit in that hole and they can keep their little den safe. But they're also designed in such a way that they're each numbered, and they all have a lid on them, so we can actually lift that lid up and see what's inside of there. And every day we check to make sure that they're alive and healthy. All zoo animals are checked multiple times a day to make sure they're alive, and hellbenders are no different here. So from here, why don't we go in and see if we can't get a look at some of these guys in the stream. So at this point, let me see the camera there for a second. We've got a very special apparatus that we use for our camera here so that we can actually dive in and get a look at some of these guys. And see there, you can get a nice glare-free view of the bottom of our stream. You'll notice it's all cobble like it would be out in the wild. And then we can come around here and get a look at this little guy who happens to be trying to climb out of the water. This is one of our smallest males. His name is Clubby. We named him that because he's got a club foot for a back foot. It was probably an injury that he sustained in the wild because all of our adults are actually wild caught. They do happen to get into fights and stuff, especially around breeding time. And if we get to some of the other ones, we'll actually get to take a look at some of those wounds that they incur. So we're going to run all the way down to the other end of the stream here. And I'm going to take you through our live checking process. And that way you can see what we see every day. So the first thing we do is we go to this box here. And as you look down through the hole, you can see that somebody's home in there. And by the looks of it, I would say that would be our giant female. We call her Tiamat, which is the mother of all dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. We thought it was a fitting name for her because hopefully she'll be the mother of all our new hellbenders. But in case she isn't, we've actually got two other females. Another hellbender here. Sometimes hellbenders will hide under these tiles that we have here in the stream also. And this girl right here came to us last year from the wilds, and her name is Matilda. So that's Matilda there. And like I was talking about, when they get into breeding season, you'll notice here that Matilda has actually lost the end of her tail there. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but a couple days after she was introduced, she got into a spat with somebody and they had a little fight, and that's a very typical thing for hellbenders to do. Now, as we move over to this box, this is one of our big males, and he just moved into the corner where you can't see him now. But his name is Joker, and he also has wounds all over his body. And that's just typical of their mating habits. And we'll just continue on down through the boxes real quick. See if anybody else is home. Doesn't look like anybody's in that one. It's very interesting. They move around a lot. We do keep track of their movements. They seem to find boxes that they like. Here's one of our younger males again, or smaller males. I can't really say younger because we don't know exactly how old they are. They were caught in the wild, so we can take guesses, but we don't know entirely for sure. But as you can see, they're very happy in our stream here, and it's very much like the environment that they came from. Another box with either nobody home or somebody hiding. Sometimes it can be quite difficult for them or to find them. So we have some tools that we use. Another thing to note about the bottom of our stream here is the, like I said, this is cobble. But if you'll notice, if you move the cobble around, you get a little bit of dirt that comes out of it. In a stream, that's normal. The bottoms of streams are often dirt and then cobble over the top. The problem comes in when we get too much siltation from things like construction and erosion, and they fill in those little spaces in between the cobble and under all the rocks. And when that happens, the hellbenders no longer have any place to reproduce. And that's one of the things we're finding out in the wild now, is that due to habitat degradation and pollution, that their habitat is becoming less and less viable for them. So that's one of the reasons why we've decided to start this head starting and captive breeding program, so that we can take steps to mitigate that. And a lot of people ask us, if there's still hellbenders in the wild and you can go out and collect their eggs, why do we need to breed them in captivity and make more eggs? Well, the fact of the matter is, there's multiple reasons why, but the main reason is because they're getting harder and harder to find eggs out in the wild. What we're seeing is an older and older population that is not reproducing as much as it used to or at all. And the clutches of eggs that we're finding are becoming more and more scarce. So we figure our best shot at keeping the species alive and going is to actually breed them here in captivity. Also, it'd be a nice feather in our caps. Everybody likes bragging rights, and as zookeepers, we always want to be the first ones to breed anything. So hopefully this year will be our year. We've had the stream up and going for about 2 years now. The first year we had 3 males and 1 female, and as it worked out, that wasn't a great mix. We didn't know how old the female was at the time. She's still in here, and she's still going to be a part of our program, but we've decided to add 2 more females to the mix. And we're hoping that this year, with everybody settled in and ready to go, that we're actually going to be successful and have some eggs. Now, the question might arise, what do we do with eggs after we find them? Well, over here on the other side of the room, we have a system in place to actually take care of our eggs for us. Now, in the wild, the females would travel from den to den and find males, and they would lay their eggs. The males would fertilize them, and then the females would leave, and the males would actually be in charge of all the prenatal care, or parental care. But with the hellbenders in captivity, we find that sometimes that doesn't work out great. Sometimes the eggs get destroyed for one reason or another, or they don't have great viability. So we've actually found a really neat solution to that. What we have here is what we call our egg system. In this system, I've got it set up so we can show you a little bit of a demonstration. What this does, in the wild, the male would actually continuously roll these eggs and keep track of them. And by the way, these are grapes, not eggs. We're using grapes as a nice little stand-in here. They work similarly to hellbender eggs, not quite as well, but they make a good standby. And the way this works is this air pump is on a timer, and every once in a while it kicks on, and then it rolls our eggs around for us. And see how they nicely float up there and get jostled around? That's exactly what we want to happen. It's a little more dramatic with hellbender eggs. They're a little more neutrally buoyant than grapes are, but this does give you an idea of what goes on. So as the air comes up and moves the eggs around, we know that the embryos are not laying on one side of that egg casing and becoming attached to it which causes birth defects. So in this way, we've gotten our survivability rate of our eggs up over, I think it's over 94%. I'd have to check with Nick for the exact number, but I know it's an extremely high rate of survivorship. So that's what we do here in the breeding program. And shortly, you'll get to see what happens to the eggs after they hatch out and turn into tiny little hellbenders. But at this point, I think it's time for questions, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Sean?
There we go. Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Well, I have a few questions.
Okay.
So the first question we have from Amy Stinton. She wants to know, what is your male to female ratio in your breeding tank?
We now have an even ratio. So we have 3 males and 3 females. Like I said before, we started out with 3 males and 1 female. The thought being that the female could visit all those males. But we're now thinking that in the wild, the ratio is a little different than that. So we've upped the number of females that we have, and hopefully that will spell success for us this year.
Okay, well, good. The females are very hard to come by in the wild. We have a skewed male to female ratio in the wild, at least in Indiana. Do the big hellbenders kick the small ones out of the boxes?
That's actually really interesting. What we tend to see is that they tend to pile up on each other. They really seem to enjoy close contact with other individuals. So sometimes you'll see 2, 3, or 4 of them all crammed into a box, just all stacked up on top of each other. And that's one of the reasons it makes it really hard to track their location in the stream, is because, like I said, sometimes they'll be piled up and you can't tell how many benders are in that one box. The only time we ever really see any aggression is during mating season. And I wouldn't really call it so much aggression as just their mating dance.
Okay. All right. What about, where did all those adult hellbenders come from?
So actually, the guy asking the question actually brought most of them to us. Nick is a field researcher. He brings them to us. So most of the ones we have, I believe, are from the Little Blue River. One of them is from the wild, so I believe she came from Ohio.
Okay. Yeah. I think the slight correction, they're all just from the Blue River, not the Little Blue. The Little Blue used to have hellbenders, but they don't have them anymore.
Gotcha.
What about so Kat Tessero asks, are the hellbenders on the back wall? I think there's a picture. Are they showing healthy versus unhealthy, or are those stages of growth, or something else?
I can't quite hear.
Stages of growth or unhealthy animals.
So we're talking about these guys up here on the wall? Okay, so those are our identification pictures. Those are actually the first 4 hellbenders that we had in the system. So you've got Tiamat, Clubby, Nick, and Joker up there. And Nick is actually named because he's got a nick out of his head. He's not named after our Nick. But those are just photos so that we can keep track of them, because I don't believe these guys are pit tagged. So we actually use their natural body coloring and spot patterning to be able to tell them apart.
All right. So Christine Fisher asks, if they all pile up on top of each other, are they still considered solitary? So that's not really a behavior that we normally see in the wild. They mostly just seem to do it in the zoo. Is that correct?
Honestly, I've not collected in the wild with you guys yet. I've only been to one release, but as far as I know, in the wild, they are more solitary. The males will find a den that they return to or stay in year after year after year, and they do defend that, and they become very territorial. For some reason, in the zoo setting, they seem to be a little friendlier with each other. They will tolerate each other's presence. But once again, when it comes to breeding season, which is rapidly approaching, they will start kicking each other out of the nest boxes, and the males will just have one male in the nest box. They do allow the females to come and go.
Okay. Then I think time for one last question. Does the missing foot for Clubby, does he move around? Does he have any problems moving around since he's missing a foot?
Actually, Clubby is our little guy that actually does the most traveling. He likes to get out and walk around. He likes to swim. He's not missing the entire foot. It'd be basically like if you took off those fingers, and he's just got basically 2 digits left, and then the rest of his foot. But it does not slow him down at all. It doesn't even seem to be a handicap. He seems to be just as capable as all the rest of them.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's all the questions for you, Sean. Let's go ahead and move over to Bryan and see what he has to say.
All righty.
Thank you.
Hello, hello. This is my turn now. So you just met Sean. I'm Bryan Plis. I'm the other Hellbender keeper here at Mesker Park Zoo. And I am up here in our Discovery Center, which is our conservation and education building. So up here we've got red panda breeding, all of our ambassador animals, as well as our juvenile hellbenders. So what I'm going to do for you guys today is a couple of different things. We're going to end with a feeding, but I wanted to kind of show you a lot of what we do as far as husbandry goes, and show you a couple different things to kind of point out that help us in our kind of day-to-day care and month-to-month care for these guys. So what we have here are what we call spot patterns. And those juveniles that Sean started with came to us when they were very, very small, about the size of the ones that you're about to see. And each of them has a unique spot pattern. So what they came with are these little identification guides. And if you can see, each individual hellbender, just like a fingerprint, has a unique set of spots on it. So these are two different animals. You notice there's no black dots or anything like this on this individual, but then some on this individual. So when they're very small, this is really the only way to tell individuals apart. But as they get bigger, they're able to be identified with a pit tag. I believe some of the other talks that have been done talked about pit tags, but now we can just scan each individual and know exactly who they are. And then next door to that, we've got essentially just a measuring device for hellbenders. So it's a PVC tube cut in half, and then we've got dimensions going in two different directions, and they're all in centimeters, because here in the zoos, we actually do everything on the metric system. And the reason we do that is because we are not the only country that has zoos in it, and most of the world deals in the metric system. So when we want to communicate dimensions and weights and all that good stuff, we want to make sure that we're communicating in the same language. So that's why we use the metric system on them. This is just a nifty device. The hellbender goes in and we're able to actually measure in a couple different directions. But for what you guys came for is for the feeding. So what I've laid out here are actually three different food items that we give to our hellbenders at varying different sizes. So the individuals you're about to see are about 2.5 years old. And they, at this stage, are in our mysis shrimp stage. So this is actually just a frozen block of mysis shrimp. It sells in pet stores just like fish food is. And we thaw it out in little cups like this. And then we'll actually kind of scatter feed them to that. I've already went ahead and cheated and fed most of the mysis out today, so we get to see a little bit of activity. But as they get a little bit bigger, they graduate to earthworms. So we get large containers of earthworms just like this. And then their primary prey in the wild is crayfish. Now, in captivity, live crayfish is hard to both come by and to produce at zoos. They're actually pretty difficult to reproduce. So what we do is we get them in frozen. And for the little tiny hellbenders, I have to chop all their tails off, then thaw them out, remove the shell, and then cut it into little bite-sized pieces that you would see in gumbo or etouffee or anything like that. So what I'm going to do for you is introduce you to our hellbenders. Let me feed this tank real quick. But what you'll notice in that tube in the back there is the normal way that we see them. But as they start smelling the food, because their sense of smell is pretty good, we got some starting to come out now. But I'll go ahead and move you down here since we got a lot of feeding activity going on here. So this is normally what happens when all the hellbenders start to graze on those mysis shrimp. So we've got 66 individuals up here, all separated out into tanks, just so there isn't too much crowding or anything like that. But after I introduce you to all of them, then I'll individually feed some crayfish pieces. We're trying to get them to experience a variety of food here. So we graduated them pretty quickly to the crayfish stage just to see if they would like it. And of course they do, because it's a very tasty treat for hellbenders. And we will see some fighting here and there when they feed. They actually do kind of suction feeding, so they'll open their mouths very, very quickly and suck whatever's in front of their mouths into their mouth and then swallow it. So unfortunately for other hellbenders, sometimes that means somebody's tail tip or something like that. So you'll notice Sean was talking about Matilda losing part of her tail. That is not uncommon. So let me try to see if I can find somebody up close to feed for you guys. I think this tank is a good, maybe this guy. I'm gonna kind of juggle this with one hand. There you go. So as they get bigger, crayfish becomes a more dominant part of their diet. So this crayfish feeding is kind of a special treat just to introduce them to it, since obviously crayfish tail meat isn't prepped this pretty for them in the wild. Here's that first tank that I fed out. And we feed them 3 times a week. At this stage, they get the mysis shrimp that you're seeing twice a week, and then earthworms or red wigglers once a week. Got any other takers here? And just for a sense of scale, I do have a quarter here. So this is how big these individuals are right now. And again, they are 2.5 years old. And we've had this exhibit up and running for the past 4 years. And we started out with those 18 individuals that are now rather large down in the stream room. And we're basically helping raise these guys up to get a good size as well. Well, I feed out the rest of them. Nick, I'm not sure if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, we have a few questions. So I think one of the first things I wanted to talk about was how long are those spot patterns good for, Brian?
The spot patterns are pretty much good for at least the first 5 years of their lives. They do, the spots obviously will change in size and shape as the animal itself gets bigger, but it still is pretty consistent. But one of the recommendations that I would give to facilities who raise them is definitely the sooner you can identify them with tags, the easier the weighing and the measuring goes. Because really the amount of time it takes to ID their spot patterns is kind of the most time consuming part of the weighing and the measuring. But each individual spot patterns kind of remain relatively similar throughout at least the first 5 or 6 years or so.
Okay, so our next question is from Kat Tessero. She asks, how can they eat crayfish in the wild if you have to cut them up in captivity?
Well, I'm only cutting these up for these small individuals because at their size in the wild, they wouldn't normally be preying on crayfish. But they will pretty effectively kill a crayfish, an adult especially. They'll basically grab it from the rear and shake it until the claws fall off and then swallow the whole thing whole. So our large adults will get the whole crayfish, but this is cutting them up is kind of what we do for these little babies since they're still babies.
Yeah, and it's hard to find little baby crayfish in captivity too. So they could probably eat those with the claws, but
yes,
but they're hard to come by.
There are minnows in here, and they have consumed minnows almost as big as them, so they are perfectly capable of catching and killing. This is just to make sure that they're aware of what food is and kind of each get the appropriate amounts. So there's not a lot of fighting among the siblings here.
Yeah. All right. So Karen Royal, we're still talking a little bit about food. She wants to know, do they ever eat fishing bait, or do the fishermen ever catch them?
They do. Hellbenders, as pretty as they are, aren't the most intelligent animal. They basically hunt by smell and by vibration. So fishing lures in particular are designed to do just that, to be smelly and or to vibrate. So fishermen do catch them. One of the things we recommend to fishermen, if you do catch a hellbender, do not try to remove that hook because, like I was saying before, when they eat, they suck in a lot of water, so they can swallow that lure pretty deep. And if you try to remove it, you could definitely take out the insides of the hellbender, and that would not be good. So the best thing to do is just cut the line, and the hook will take care of itself eventually.
Okay. All right. And Christine Fisher, she wants to know, how deep do you keep the water in those tanks?
We keep the water about halfway. So these are 40-gallon tanks that are in front of me. So we've got roughly 10 to 12 inches of water in the 20-gallon system, roughly the same. And that's just an arbitrary level. It doesn't necessarily matter too much. This is more or less a controlled environment. We just want to make them fat and happy. We don't necessarily aim to replicate the wild conditions like the stream room. So we just have the water level low enough so there is no possibility of them, kind of getting close to the top or hurting themselves. So we keep the water level about halfway.
Okay. So Carrie Brianna, she wants to know, do these hellbenders, have they learned any sort of feeding routine? She said that they have 2 at a facility that she works at, and they recognize when they open the lid that it's time to come eat.
Oh, absolutely. These individuals have not been at our facility for very long, the ones that I'm feeding right now, but the juveniles that we've had here for the past 4 to 5 years definitely have predatory behavior when the lid's open or whenever there's activity. Interesting thing that I've noted in a few of the individuals' cases is they will even cache their food. So I've seen minnows that have been caught and killed would then be shoved into pipes and then nibbled on kind of half at a time. I wouldn't say that's normal behavior, but it was something that one individual decided was a good idea. Other things that you can do, see if I can reach one of these, is little PVC rings. Some facilities will actually kind of station feed them. And so they'll kind of learn to come to a ring when food is placed in it. And then another individual, Matilda here, is target trained. So she's actually targeted to essentially a fishing bobber, and she will time to time touch her nose to it for a reward. again, hellbenders aren't necessarily the most intelligent creature. They don't have to be. They've been around a lot longer than us, and they've survived just okay without us. But yes, there are some behaviors that I've observed can be developed over time.
Okay. All right. Well, Bryan, that is all the questions that I've received so far. So we appreciate your help today.
No problem.
All right, everybody. We want to thank our partners for helping. It's really cool, everything that they get to do and help us accomplish here. So we greatly appreciate their partnership as well. So if there is no more questions, then we'll probably go ahead and end this segment. If there are any other kind of topics that you guys are interested in learning about for the Hellbenders, please let us know in the comments so that we can continue this series each week. Otherwise, I hope you guys all have a great day and stay safe. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.